Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of the Get Overit Podcast, for which we have an awesome guest who by day is a musician and composer, and by night, a consultant for NASA on how to put microphones on Mars. Now, I chose this as our first episode because I think it really embodies what we're trying to do on this podcast, and that is getting out of your comfort zone, not just getting through it, but figuring out a way to take something to the next level and getting over it. Our guest today recalls an account from early in his childhood where someone came into class to talk to them about the wonder of space. That experience stuck with him throughout his life, and it stuck with him so much that through constant prodding and poking, he eventually found himself as a consultant on a project that would bring all of us here on Earth some of the first sounds of Mars. Why? Because he didn't stop. He never let that go. He took that experience from early on and didn't let that fire die, no matter where his life journey took him. He didn't just stare up at space and be inspired by its awe. He took his passion, his knowledge, and figured out a way to get himself and all of us here on Earth a bit closer to that magnificent unknown world that lights up the sky every time we look out at night. So what do you say? Let's learn more about it and let's get over it. All right, so I'm super pumped to finally get to the interview with my guest today because we've been talking for 15 minutes. Jason Achilles Mezilis, who is a rock and roll musician and an extraterrestrial audio engineer, as he coined himself. Or no, you didn't coin yourself this, but you might start taking this space roadie, which I love, he loves. Those are two things, by the way, rock and roll musician and extraterrestrial audio engineer, that I aspire to be in my next life. But seriously, Jason is he's a rock multi-instrumentalist, a record producer, orchestral composer, and by day, by night, working with, this is a very relevant story right now with NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the JPL, on a project to capture the sounds, the sights of Mars with the Mars Perseverance rover that recently, when we're recording this, it literally just landed like a week ago. So we're going to talk to him about, his life, his career, his music, and what's going on Mars right now. Jason, my man, finally, welcome to get started on the show. How you doing, man?
Say, we met 10 minutes ago. How the heck do you know all this stuff?
And I wish everybody could know what we were talking about. We were talking about everything from how lions are different than humans. Are bees smart? Right.
We're going to lead with David Blaine, though, because I was going to tell you the story.
Dude, tell me about David Blaine.
Hey, by the way, do I need to watch my language on here?
I would tone it down, but you can let some fly, I guess, everyone. I'll put an E on the show so everybody knows.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we were talking, I don't know, how did David Blaine come up?
We were talking about creep.
Creepy things that could show up in your
Yeah, we were talking about creepy things, and then David Blaine came up.
Oh, about choice, manipulating choice.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about. So a buddy of mine, this was many years ago, and a buddy of mine were watching late night TV on my couch, and David Blaine was the guest. And I want to say he was on Leno, I think. And he did a card trick for the audience. And it was just this like, all right, I'm going to do it. The audience can participate. So he holds up a deck of cards, and he just goes through them or something. It's something he like basically says, go ahead and pick a card in your brain. Don't tell you who you're with, whatever. And he does the whole trick at the end of the thing. Without any other, he pulls out the card and he shows it, and it's the card I had thought of in my brain.
That you thought of at home.
At home, on my couch, and I look over at my buddy, and he's looking at me, and we both turned white.
Wait, he was thinking about it too? Did he do it too?
The same card,
dude.
Jack of Hearts or Jack of Diamonds.
I don't understand that guy.
It was the craziest magic trick I ever saw in my life. You're talking about forcing, decisions on people through marketing and stuff. That's what we were talking about earlier. And this guy had us pick a card at home.
I don't know how he does those things. Some of those things he does
freaks me out, dude.
He does that like back in the
day.
That
guy is Satan.
The street magic. Like those, he used to have street magic, those like YouTube series. You can go watch him where he'll go to he goes to these random, sometimes poor neighborhoods, and he'll just go up to random people and he'll do these
and he'll fly and stuff, yeah,
and then he'll just bail, he just bails out of nowhere. There was this
the ultimate magic troll, dude, but he's actually doing it,
and they freak out because I remember this one thing about he was down in New Orleans and he was on Bourbon Street, and he had that card trick where these they're drinking, and he takes a card and they take it from him and they write something on it, like their name or something.
Right, and it's
They
like he like
fold it
spits
up.
it out or
Dude,
something.
they fold it up. He puts it in his mouth. He spits it into the corner. And then all of a sudden, like, they go get the bottle on the floor and there's beer in it and the same card is in there. I'm like, how is that possible? Like, I don't understand.
It's like 7 levels beyond what it would be to convince you that it's already
right. Like, you don't really need to go that far. And then
it's been incinerated. It's,
and so of course, dude, right. This group of people, they're drunk. They're already drunk. So they're like completely freaked out and they look to find him and he's gone. he's gone.
Yeah. And he just bails.
If that was me, I'd be like, yo, I saw someone from another world or life tonight. That guy that showed up with that card is not from this world.
There's a movie called Red Lights with Cillian Murphy and Sigourney Weaver. That's an amazing film that almost nobody ever saw, but it has to deal with how magic, if magic somehow could potentially exist, how it would weave its way into the normal world. And Robert De Niro's in it too. It's Red Lights. I can't remember who directed, but I highly recommend anybody who's into this kind of stuff needs to see that movie.
I mean, talk about influencing like your choice or influencing you. I think David Blaine's whole game is like, granted, he does those crazy endurance things where he stood up on that pole in New York City. Like, that's different. But these tricks,
like putting stuff through his arm and stuff, and
like through his lip, like whatever he does, or like swallowing a frog and then regurgitating the frog or something.
Well, it's almost like the supernatural was like not enough of a challenge for that guy. So now he's got to actually like overtake his own physicality.
So crazy. Good for him. I mean, good for him. If this ever makes it to you, David Blaine, come on the show and tell me how you do that. I would love to talk about it. All right, Jason. So listen, I want to talk about a lot of things. I really want to get to the Mars piece because it's relevant. But before we get there, I need to know now more so. I'm talking to you for longer than what people are hearing. Because like this establishes you as a human, as your journey. Like, what was a young you like? What were you about? Were you always into music? Was that what drove you? How did you fall into that? So talk to me about like a younger you.
Well, it's funny because I remember young being very quiet and insecure, and sort of. I grew up in a forest in Michigan. You grew
up in a forest in Michigan.
Yeah,
you're not from California. You're not from.
Well, when I was a kid, I should say, I grew up in Northern California, but as a kid, I lived in Michigan, and I was born in Chicago, actually. But people who knew me back then, or relatives or aunts or whatever, they're like, no, you were always like really loud and running around and in everybody's face.
You're like, really? I don't remember.
In my perspective, I was very quiet and like kind of scared about everything. And they're like, nah, you weren't.
Nah, dude, not at all.
But I do remember. So recently, I was told that before I was old enough to speak, my parents would take me and put me in front of a actual, record player and put a record on, and I would just sit there and not move and just. So apparently,
just vibe out to it. See, that goes back to talking about the brain being inborn. Like, I feel like a musician or people who are music minded have that. I feel like it's wired in there.
It's absolutely from my father's side of the family.
Okay.
No question. I mean, my mom loves and enjoys music and participates in it, but every single person on my Greek side of the family is musically, I don't know, I guess gifted would be this. Like, even if they've never played an instrument,
easy to them, right? Like
they all sing beautifully. They automatically deviate to the harmonies of a melody, and not
right. It's not just the normal trying to sing; they actually sing, right?
Yeah, and they'll split into the right parts, and those are the ones that aren't doing it, professionally. One of my cousins in Greece is a cardiologist and an orchestral flautist.
What? It's such an interesting combo.
And that's not the one who's a neurologist.
Where in Greece, by the way? We didn't establish this yet. Where in Greece?
Well, the family's from a town called Elassona, which is sort of in the mountainous region near Olympus.
Okay.
Which was on the old road from Athens to Thessaloniki before they built the big, but it was sort of an important city. It's been there. There's talk. Homer mentioned it in his writings, and that was how many thousands of years ago?
Thousands of years ago.
Yeah, it had a slightly different name, but apparently it's been tracked in antiquity for millennia, this little town. And but now my family they're everywhere.
Have you gone? Do you go? Like, have you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been there last year, but obviously
Something happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a travel issue.
Something happened. So, all right. So you vibe to music. It's in your
spit on my coffee.
It's in your DNA, right? So, but like, was it always a big thing, or was it just there? You know, some people don't find it until later.
No, it was always a big thing for me. When I got into, first it was piano. I remember seeing when I was, I think 5 years old, I saw a broadcast of who I later figured out was most likely Vladimir Horowitz. And he was playing piano for Reagan or something like that at the White House, which would explain why it ended up on our little, black and white TV.
Right.
And it looks like it was about I would have been, I was really young when that was put out, obviously. But I remember him like hitting the keys and just like he has huge hands. And there's something about the way too, that like his touch and his sound where it just sounds massive. And as a kid, I just remember like, oh, that's so cool. Like just this powerful thing that could come out of this physical action, Plus, like he's on TV and you're watching him do it at the same time. I imagine that had something, you know what I mean? Like something like that. Yeah, I guess so. Like, yeah, it was right before the Muppet Show, and like there was a sensationalism to it.
It's like Pavlov's reward, dude. The light comes on and the food comes out,
Pavlov's reversal, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
So funny. That was, my parents basically were like, they said that I would have to play an instrument, but they would let me choose what, which I actually thought was a really cool strategy. And I recommend that for like people, because like
not trying to be like play piano.
Yeah, but forcing something like, okay, you are going to learn something, but we'll let you figure out what that is.
And what age was that?
And so if you want to be a musician, there's many things you do. If you don't want to be a musician, you can pick drums.
So what age?
That was for Dan.
For Dan. So Jason was in band with Dan Dinsmore, who is the founder of Overit. And that's the connection here. I'm going to get to that, I think, in a little bit. But hold on, I want to know what age that is, because I have an 8-year-old, and I've been really wanting him to get into. Now's the time, right?
Yeah, it's
probably past it, like in the brain.
Now's the latest you should be doing
right.
it. But
brain wires around 5, so like if it's
I started around 6 or 7. So.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So then what? I mean, you go through like high school. When do you start playing in band? Like when does it start coming together, or you start compose? Like when does it start really coming together for you? Where like I'm doing this.
You know what? I remember having career day in high school, and they brought. I don't know if they'd still do this anymore, but back then they used to bring, like, you go into this room, there's a fireman in there. He's telling you what it's like to be a fireman. It's like open house day, and like all these different rooms where different people do different things. And through going and talking to these people, you're supposed to figure out what you want to do for a career. And first of all, just making the decision that quickly didn't seem to make any sense to me. Right. But also I remember going through, and like some people did really cool things in it, but none of it like clicked. And then I remembered we had a guy when I was in like 3rd grade or something like that, 3rd or 4th grade, who brought in a synthesizer one day, and he was making helicopter noises on a synth. And I thought that was the coolest stuff in the world. And it was like back when synths were still had knobs and buttons and weird, crazy crap all over.
Right.
So that was the only one that ever grabbed me, and basically by process of elimination, I ended up, I know I love music, and there's nothing else that seems to make sense. So that's why I studied music in college.
But I feel like, hold on, I feel like right there, I feel like that the get over it moment for most humans in music that doesn't happen is I really like music. I know I really like it, and there's a but, right? Like, it's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with music? Like, so did you face that, or no, you went right through it? And is that the difference between someone that does?
That took 25 more years for me to figure that.
It did.
How to actually make it into a career.
Okay. All right. But you didn't care about that is my point. Like you just did it.
Well, no. And maybe, it's funny because nowadays, when somebody tells me, oh, my kid is really interested in music, what do? I tell them, sign them up for financial planning classes immediately. Because that's the real skill that will allow them to be a musician. If they want to have a sustainable career, they need to learn that their art, if that's going to make, they can't just be doing it for fun. I mean, You shouldn't.
Right. Because that's where that's where those two brains don't meet. Right.
If you,
the musician
they don't.
And
There's
the artist
just
does that, and those guys do that. So that's what makes it some more difficult to know that, like that you need to really be able to manage stuff. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely a lot of the most successful musicians out there, especially in the pop world, where it's a lot less about the actual song or the actual performance, and it's much more about a package delivery, which is like a whole creative team. It's producers and engineers and all these things. You know, you look at your Katy Perry's got, you know, I mean, I'm not saying she can't write a song. She's talented, but you know, there's like 8 co-songwriters on most of those hits.
Right.
And a lot of, you know, so nowadays the musicality isn't necessarily the most important part of a hit song.
Correct.
Especially in the pop world.
Definitely in the pop world. But what world is it in outside of like symphony or orchestra? Like what, do you know what I mean? Do you feel like it's like that, like with rock, or is it just someone in rock is biased and will say, no, that's more of an art, like a writing. You know what I mean by that? Why is it just for pop that? Because
pop is more, it's not about the
sound,
structure of a,
it's just the sound.
Yeah, it's more about hooks. It's not as much about an overall, you know,
like melodic sort of thing.
Yeah, it's not about.
I just wanted to use the word melodic in this conversation, by the way, just so you know.
I think there's more like scientific technique applied to generating a pop hit. Not to say you can't have one by accident by being very musical. Like the Police are a great example of the band, the Police. They you know, brilliant, tight pop structure, you know, and amazing delivery, and created through chaos, bubbling. Anybody knows anything about the Police, that band was just, you know, fist fights all the time, you know. But a brilliant element of songwriting, you know, production in a songwriting aspect that was applied to that. But it's not about little hooks every 2 seconds.
Correct.
Everything now is designed to catch you and hold your ear within seconds. And every 4 bars, there's a certain change. You know, there's always things to keep you hooked, keep you interested, keep you like,
repetition.
That's like, they call them hooks, right? Like,
repetition is what makes the brain remember something, right? You just do it over.
Right. Repetition, but with changing over time in very specific increments.
So tell me, like, did you and do you have a favorite instrument, or do you continue to try to expand your range? Like, do you mess around with new things? Like, you know, have you settled into something, or what's, because like playing one instrument's one thing, but playing multiple instruments, how do you have a first love kind of thing?
I find I don't find myself reaching too much for different voices. It's sort of like, I don't know, it's kind of like, you know, there's certain singers that can sing in a million different ways, and there's other ones they do like one thing really well. And I find that I've like the kind of music I've always loved and the kind of bands I've always loved, it's about personality, and a lot of I think the expression of personality has to do with an unwavering approach to something. And like, for example, the sound of my guitar, I remember I was in San Francisco when I discovered the sound of my guitar, and it's a very unique combination of a certain pickup and a certain kind of old amp that like everybody has, but almost nobody ever uses in a consistent fashion. And one of the ways I made it consistent was by going to my guitar and ripping out all the other pickups in the guitar that could possibly pull me away from that sound once I found it.
So it became like your default. It's like your default sound.
So then I forced once I realized that I would play different things on different pickups, for example. And every time I played something with stuff with this one setting, it was cool. And on other settings, stuff sounded kind of cheesy and like butt rocky and things like that, you know?
Yep.
And so I realized, well, you know what? It seems like I should just get rid of the temptation to do stuff that sucks.
Right. Just stick to this sound.
So I physically dismantled the instrument in such a way that it wouldn't allow me the opportunity to create bad riffs with it anymore.
See, that's very smart of you. You see that? We were talking about what smart means and what it means to actually be smart or intelligent. I would argue that that's smart. That is you are mindful and aware of something, and then you actually did something to maintain the presence, which I have tattooed on my arm because I rarely stay present. But there's like a way to force yourself into the sound that you just love, right? I mean, that's smart.
I guess but it was more of an emotional. I mean, it was more of an emotional.
Come on,
thing.
It's smart, man. You can just say it. It's fine. It's all good.
Well, I was just like, if you're making stuff and then you feel like, you feel down on yourself because it sucks. Like, well, I don't want to feel
right. I don't want to feel like that anymore.
And obviously, when I do that thing, it sucks. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Like.
So
I don't know.
Tell me when you met Dan. So I want to talk about this real quick, and then I want to get into the current stuff before we don't have too much time. So where did you meet Dan? Like, because Dan, he wasn't on the West Coast, was he? Or was this a whole part of his life?
So Dan and I were in a band for many years called Owl, which was, and the bass player singer of that band was, his name is Chris Wise, and I had known Chris in LA. We'd been introduced by a mutual friend at a bar. Best way to meet people, and I've met a lot of my. At
least it was before this whole thing. Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's a rare way to meet people.
Yeah, I know.
No, but it was funny. A friend of mine, she introduced us, and she's like, I don't know. You guys need to meet each other. I feel like there's something you're going to do together or should do together. And she, ended up being right. And so when he needed to record a new record and he had hit the reset on the previous version of the band, so he didn't have band members anymore. And he basically said, hey, do you want to come play guitar on this recording with another guitar player friend of ours and his drummer, who was his childhood friend from back home in upstate New York. And so I met Dan like we had, I think, one rehearsal together, and then we recorded an album of songs we'd never heard before, just going off of demos. And that's how I met Dan. And this was in, I think it was in Matt Sorum's studio in Beverly Hills area. He had in sort of a nice studio in his backyard, in a guest house kind of thing.
Jeez.
And it was like total what? This is cool.
You're like, wow, this is great. Well, I want to, how the hell does that, I met Dan. How does that work, man? How do you come into a situation? So this is this is a band, you're coming into play, and it's like I imagine it's sort of like football. Like you go into the new team, they have a whole new system, they have their own plays and they have their thing. And you're a good player, but it's a different system. How do you get in that? Do you just jam out to get a sense for how people are? Is there music to guide the sound? How does that work? Or do you just say, I'm doing what I do in your context? How does that work?
No, so the way you just asked that was actually perfect, because that's exactly what it was. Because the sound of that band was very different from sort of everything I was just describing you about the sound I've developed for myself.
Yeah.
But I did try and adapt that as much as I could. There's a very strong sort of tonal mid-range push in the guitar sound I have now. I tried to bring that into that band where it was more like Les Pauls through Marshalls. It's usually like a scooped mid-range kind of, so I tried to give it that was like a little piece of myself that I brought to that band, tonally, I guess. But that was exactly it, is that because the songs were there and structured in demo form, we really sort of I don't know, it's like jumping on a pirate ship together. The ship is, it's still being built, but there's a strong framework, and they're like, all right, we're going to finish the rest while we're sailing.
Right.
There's enough there so it'll float on the water.
Right.
And you can get out of port, but you're hammering the decks on, you're pulling the sail up, you're trying to do all these things. Somebody's hopefully steering it, but that's how it is. They're like, there's the ship, get on. We have one day on the dock. We're just real quick. We'll check the hull. And everyone's on the ship. We're leaving tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going.
And that's literally what happened. We had one. I think it was just one rehearsal, maybe two, but I want to say it was one.
And how long was your run with them then? How long was that with Dan?
Pretty much, it was 10 years, I think.
Jeez.
Yeah, and but Dan and I are still, obviously good friends, and he's amazing. I don't know. Dan, have you done one of these with Dan, by the way?
No, he'll be a guest though on the show. He'll be
you gotta
Oh yeah, I got to reserve some time for that episode, man.
You got to tear into that.
I gotta get some time for that one. But let me, looking at the time, let's talk about Mars, man, because I got to tell you something. The scientist in me has frequently debated people about the necessity of NASA, the necessity of space exploration, because a lot of time And I think it was like Neil deGrasse Tyson who kind of gets the public credit for like making science like cool and making the case for space. But it's,
these days, yeah. But
these
Carl
days,
Sagan's the
correct. I agree with you. Agree.
He's the Johnny Carson.
He's the Johnny Carson. You're exactly right. Yeah. You're exactly right. And without wonder and without that sense of like the child looking up in the sky, seeing the star and being like, what is that? We don't really have anything left. That's how I feel, because as the human with the different brain, that's what's going to keep us the dominant species, is the ability to wonder, to think and be rational, explore what you can, and then hopefully get to a point where you realize you can't. But what I want to say is, why the hell, but I never went there. What made you get into space? Like, what was it about it that pulled you towards it?
So it's funny because,
it's been a while, right, dude? Before this thing started.
Well, we're doing the, I don't know how long when this podcast will air, but we're doing this on a Friday morning right now. It's about 10:30. And at noon, I'm speaking to a class of kindergartners.
So that's why you love to do it.
That's because I remember being in kindergarten when our teacher came in and spoke to us about it. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And it lit something that never went out.
That's awesome, dude. That's like, cause that's what it's about, man. It's that like instilling that awe, like that.
Well, I think kids are great too, because, if you can catch any kid before, I'm not sure what age cynicism comes along.
I don't.
And I don't have my own kids that I'm aware of. So
I feel like with the technology nowadays, earlier and earlier, you know what I'm saying?
I do think that you're exactly right about that. And it's funny because I've always had this like issue with technology, especially with younger folks, but
same.
I've never been able to get it. You just explained why I feel that way. And that's wonderful. You're right, because exactly that. Technology introduces cynicism to people. I mean, through its not in and of itself, technology is great, but anything you can steep into the mind of a kid before, I think cynicism is the enemy of everything beautiful in life. It's the enemy of art. Cynicism is terrible, which is why I never got into 90s rock.
Oh my God, that's great.
I'm totally serious, man. It's just like, this sucks. None of this feels good.
None of this feels good. I got into science because I loved the quest of it, man. It was like, I always say, it's like a puzzle where you don't know what that picture looks like on the box, but you just got a bunch of pieces. And your job is to figure out what that picture is while you're doing the puzzle. And it might take you 10 years to get two pieces to lock together. But when you lock the two together, you see the picture a little bit more clear. It's that feeling that I can't explain. Like, it's incremental advance, but on a global scale, like when you look back, it's those it's the mold that fell from the ceiling that killed the bacteria. It's that kind of thing in science.
Well, there's also something inherently honorable about the pursuit of science, and music falls in the same category. There's in and of itself absolutely nothing but goodness that comes from those passions.
It's like it's pure.
Pure, yeah.
Right.
Obviously that gets distorted, very quickly, and here comes cynicism,
Right, but that's what they're trying to do to science right now, man. They're trying to
don't get me started.
trying to get rid of the purity of science. They're trying to make it a thing that can or cannot be. Like, I don't want to get started on that either.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you this, just to that one point, because, it's funny how, like, in the midst of a pandemic, everybody's become a home scientist, closet epidemiologist.
Correct.
But for some reason, when your car breaks down, nobody, everybody still goes to the mechanic and trusts them.
Dude.
So and true. I don't understand why the science of auto mechanics is so much more. Maybe because it's a physical, tangible thing.
Because the car actually runs again. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
I think that's what actually happens. Like what people are saying right now about these vaccines is like, so let me get this straight. I get a vaccine and I have to do the same thing, still wear a mask and not see people. And they're like, listen, you got to understand people. Like,
we don't need to, this is a long conversation.
Science is not that fast, dude. We're trying, this is a real time thing that no one knows about. So as soon as we get the information, you'll get it. But for right now, just chill out for a second.
Yeah, if if you need surgery or something, you're not like suddenly you're not questioning, your doctor's political motivations anymore. You're just like, okay, right, I'll die.
You got a mass in your stomach. We need to take it out. Get it out, doc. Do whatever you got to do, right? You need this vaccine. I'm not taking that shit. Like, all right. So like, well, I don't understand. Like, but anyway, I want to get to Mars. So
we'll get there. Hey, it took 6 months the last time. If
we're gonna get to Mars.
Minutes, we're doing all right.
We're gonna get to Mars. So like you start to say to yourself, like, I'm gonna get, like, was there a problem you aimed to fix, or was it just pure like you wanted to know what Mars sounds like? Like, what was it?
Are you talking about, specifically?
Yeah, like what spurred your interest to get into where you got into, which is what, like, like, was it just the awe of space and then it took you there, or you had a specific thing you wanted to solve?
No, probably the first one. Yeah, it just sort of, it was something I loved. And then as I was getting older, I felt like not having it be a part of my life. I didn't want to be, I don't know, I hate to say it's like a fanboy, because thank God everybody, people should be fans of science. But for me, I felt like that wasn't enough. And I was starting to define myself negatively by the fact that I was on the sidelines.
And so then how did you get in the game? Like, what was your first step in the game?
Well, I started dipping my toes into it. I actually looked back recently. It was over 10 years ago. I started randomly, I started reading more science magazines, and I started cold calling, not calling, mostly emailing, scientists about some topic I'd read and be like, hey, have you thought about this? The guy on my toilet, literally, while they're like, yes, we have thought about that. Actually, but thanks, kid.
Actually, yeah, we thought about that, dude. Yeah, next.
But so I eventually finally hit upon an idea that, people had thought about, but nobody actually done it before, which was capturing sound on Mars. And at the time when I thought about it, I was with a friend of mine. I didn't, a quick, internet dive with Dr. Google, revealed that, yeah, in fact, Carl Sagan talked about this over 2 decades ago, but it hadn't actually been done yet. And then, I don't know, it was like everything exploded. It was just like, holy crap, this is it. I know about sound.
Right.
They're doing this thing. They kind of relates to this thing.
Yeah, right.
And I know how to do this thing. And like, let me in. It was just like shit. I just rattled the cage, like, hey, I want to play.
And then
it kind of worked. So.
The concept of so it's cool. Like, if you guys, like, I'm sure people out there listening, if you haven't, you can watch some stuff on it. But the concept of this sort of camera, this thing that sort of, when the rocket, when it's approaching the planet, right, and it's descending down, the idea and the concept was have something that would sort of pop off that would then be able to film and record or watch and listen the rocket, the shuttle, whatever the hell you want to call it. I'm not using the right terms. Landing.
Well, it could be any of those things. Yeah.
Could be any of those things. Actually descending, watching the descent and landing. Where did that wasn't your idea, was it? Was that their concept that you were just trying to capture some of that, or like?
So these are two different things. These are two entirely different things, but they came from the same conversation with my buddy.
All right.
The camera thing, as far as I'm aware, is my original idea. I've never heard anybody. I've met other people since then, since I put it out to the public, that have also sort of developed that idea on their own. But I haven't found anybody who's put it forward in a public avenue prior to when I did.
So, but this is not what is on the ship now. This is Okay.
So there's two. So this is this is. But there was this article that came out in Wired magazine right the week before, the day before Perseverance landed, and most of it's about the microphone, and then some of it is about this camera thing. Right. But they came from the same conversation, which was early 2016 with a buddy of mine, but they're both being developed now. So the microphone was that I ended up working with the team that helped develop, and it's a long story, but basically we helped them make the selection of the final flight hardware, which is a DPA microphone. I don't know if you guys use them in your studio or not, but it's a great company. And separately from that, late last year, I developed the camera idea into a NASA funded our project now for development for 2021.
Totally
independently.
So the microphone is there now. Is that what we're talking about?
The microphone's there, and that's the one that captured those first sounds that they shared at the press conference.
Yep.
Which again, I didn't build it. Some people are like, you said you built it. I'm like, I never said I built it, but I had a lot to do with what, my company that I basically had to start to be a consultant. We were the ones that ultimately made the final selection of the flight hardware with JPL, and then DPA is, obviously the ones that built the hardware. This it's called ExoCam. That's the
ExoCam. That's right. That was and it's got like this kind of looks like a camera encased in a ball of It's
a 360 camera inside this metal cage thing. Yeah, and that design will probably iterate quite a bit depending on. But that's the lunar ExoCam is looking like that right now.
So wait, dude, tell me how the hell you simulate like conditions on Mars, dude? Like how do you, cause like, you know what my concern is when I'm jogging down the street and I'm trying to like video myself that I'm going to get a little wind. Like, so like, how do you like, I mean, they know the conditions of Mars, but how do you recreate those? They just have simulators would recreate that?
Well, if you're talking about like
you got to know how to capture sound in an environment that's probably pretty rough, right?
Yeah, but it's more like you don't really have to simulate. I mean, well, number one, Mars actually has an atmosphere, so that helps. Like, sure. We couldn't do that on the moon for sound, but I think the lunar for the physicality of the ExoCam, I think you don't have to deal with. On the moon, you don't have any atmospheric properties to deal with. So I think modeling how it's going to work on the moon is probably a little easier. On the other hand, you have this sort of big puffy regolith everywhere on the moon. So part of our issue is like dropping this thing down and not having it sink into, if it goes into a pile of sand, then we don't see anything.
Then you're done. That would be like, dude, there's nothing. That's like a drone video of like when I lost my drone on the beach and all I got was like a whole bunch of sand because it was buried the whole time. We thought it was.
No, this is the big issue that I think we're going to run into with developing the moon camera is how do we get it, how do we make sure we get a good, because like on Mars, everything's pretty hard packed, at least that we've come to see.
Right. It'll land, it hits, it'll stick.
Yeah. And you have other considerations like, atmospheric properties you got to deal with and stuff, but, and thermal cycling, but
right. Well, that's the other thing, like the heat, like, or the temperature or the atmosphere, whatever I don't know what you want to call it. Like the sound, like, so you're saying you don't really have to, you think about those things, but you don't have to simulate them. Is that right?
Well, a lot of it's done on the paper, on the page. And then there are certain things after at some point you just need to throw them in a vacuum chamber or an atmospheric chamber and test. So with microphones, it's interesting because they're not designed to do any of what we asked this one to do, right? So when we were making our evaluation and trying to put forward, it was kind of like, okay, we don't know if this thing will work at all, but this is our best guess, honestly.
But isn't that a lot of space exploration is? Like, it's our best guess, like we're going to do it?
To some degree. I mean, there's at the same time, when they first stepped into the space shuttle, right? The space shuttle never flew as a test flight. So when those guys got into that thing the first time, they asked, even the Apollo missions, which were crazy technology for the time, they still would fly those initially without people inside them, right? So at least they got them into space without exploding and things like that. The first time astronauts stepped into the cabin of the space shuttle, I told somebody the only thing I can't figure out is how it managed to still take off despite the gravitational pull of their balls. Because they're like, all right, get in that thing. We're going to launch it. It looks good on paper.
Yeah, right. Sure. I'll see it up there.
Okay. Awesome. Good enough for us. And in they went,
Yeah. So it is a drawing of a house for me on paper, but I would never live in the house that I drew on a piece of paper. So you had a lot of trust of those people.
Exactly. So in that sense, when human life is involved, everybody gets,
Correct.
With this microphone, if it didn't work, nobody was going to die.
Right.
some people might have some career options that come forward, but they called it a technology demonstration. So basically, if it worked, great.
To lower your expectations, it's just a demonstration.
Well, and yes, and what comes with that is no kind of funding to do the tests you would do if it were a reliant system.
Right.
So there were a lot of tests that probably could have been done, like, there were, a lot more throwing things in a vacuum chamber and you can simulate, with the exception of gravity, you can simulate pretty much everything else, every other aspect of the Martian atmosphere artificially in a chamber. The gases, the pressure, the temperatures, but you can't do the gravity. Gravity doesn't really affect the microphone anyway, so that's fine. So these things could have been done more thoroughly, but they weren't. Some was a little bit, just to sort of make sure, okay, well,
right, but not to the extent of like a human going up and you got to make sure.
No.
Right.
Yeah, so they're like, well, whatever. It's
So tell everybody, like, so quickly, just describe where the microphone is, like where it's housed, like what is it, and what is it? Is it running 24/7? Like, is it constantly running? Does it turn on and turn off?
So I am not on the engineering team. I was a consultant, and my contract actually ended the day of the press conference, which was, thank God it worked,
Yeah, right.
So the day they announced that we captured this audio, and I had reviewed that data a few days prior to that, with them, with JPL. But the Perseverance about the size of a, like an SUV sort of, on Earth it weighs about a ton. So on Mars it's 30% of that roughly.
Yeah.
And if you're in the driver's seat of a car, the microphone is kind of roughly, passenger door handle height, about halfway between the front and the back door.
Okay.
So it's right on the side there.
Okay.
And
it's on one side.
There's two microphones. There was one that was part of the entry, descent, and landing system. And that's the one that I worked with.
Yeah.
And there's another one that's totally unrelated, different kind of microphone that's on part of the mast where the head basically is. Yeah. And it's called, that instrument is called SuperCam. And there's a little mic that's sort of on the end of this little pinky extrusion. It's a little electric microphone. And that one will activate, I think now it's activated. Well, by the time people hear this, it's definitely been tested.
Yeah.
But that couldn't record during landing because it was in a stowed position. So, and unfortunately ours didn't work during the landing either. So that was a whole thing.
Why? I think I saw that, or I was watching it land, and they're like, unfortunately the audio was not picked up, and I'm like, what happened? Do you know?
Yeah, it was crushing, and it wasn't until I found out that it didn't capture that 2 days before we were able. They were able to fire it up on Sol 2, day 2 of the. So when the day you land is Sol 0, and Martian days are Sols, which are.
How long is a Martian day?
It's almost the same as Earth. I think you're a little shorter, a little longer. I can't remember which, but very close to 24 hours. And just happens to be similar rotation speed, So for 2 days, everybody was congratulating me on being involved in this mission. And I knew that we did.
And you're like, yeah, dude, I can't wait to hear it.
Oh, it was crushing, man. And so then, thank God, that weekend, they ran another recording cycle once on the surface, and it did work. So it wasn't a hardware issue. It wasn't the mic. The mic was fine. It was, that was my job, was to help them pick that unit. Right. So if the diagram had ruptured or something.
So it wasn't that. It was something unique to the entry, like to the landing.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't even that. It was just. It turned out that what they said during the press conference, or I think during the Q&A later, it was basically an issue between the digitizer and the software. Adam, your engineer there, will tell this happens in the studio all the time. You turn on two pieces of gear, they just don't talk to each other. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows why. You shut them off, you turn them on again, and then they're fine.
This just happened to be a once in a lifetime while sort of landing on the Mars situation. Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know to what degree that may or may not have happened during testing, but
then you said on Sol 2 they fired it up and they were capturing sound.
They turned it on, they recorded a minute of sound. That's where, and then there's these little puffs of gust of wind at the very beginning of it. And that's what they aired during the press conference. And it was like, thank God for that wind, because everything else you're hearing is self noise, you know, but that one little wind was actually the sound of the atmosphere of the planet. So
where can
and it was only there for like
dude?
a moment.
Can people hear it?
Yeah. If you just, I mean, if you, anybody
Google like sound on Mars or something like that.
Yeah, it's not hard to find.
All right.
NASA's got it, you know, posted everywhere, and you know, yeah, I think CBS and NBC, I don't know. It's not hard to find.
So your contract with this ended. Are you still you're still working on the cam though, or no? Like you're still.
Yeah. So my contract with the day that I actually signed my papers to end my contract with JPL and invoice them, I actually, that same day I picked up, well, I don't know, picked up, but I'm now working with a company called Rocket Lab, and they want to send a probe to Venus in a couple of years. And so I've been working with them to try and capture the sounds of Venus for an atmospheric probe that would, you know, so we're on to the next planet, basically.
What's Venus's atmosphere like?
Well, it depends. On the surface, it's hell. Literally, it's, you know, 90 times Earth pressures. It's the Earth pressure. You know, so it's like if you were like, I don't know how many miles in the ocean. You know, it's crushing. And it's 800 degrees Fahrenheit.
So David Blaine would do well there.
Oh, he'd be great. He'd be walking around like, hey, what's up? You know.
Oh my God, that's.
But
great.
when you're coming through the atmosphere, there's certain spots in the atmosphere where I think if you're about, I want to say it's like 50,000 feet or something like that. It's right. It's basically Earth atmosphere and pressure. The only difference is that the actual gases are composed primarily of like sulfuric acid and things like that. So
which doesn't do well for you.
But you could be essentially, you know, like you wouldn't need a pressure suit at that atmosphere. You just need something to breathe and, you know, probably cover your vitals.
Skin from being melted. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't even know if it's like continually, it's continuous throughout. I want to say the sulfuric acid is more like in clouds and like it rains
of it.
Sulfuric.
It's not like it's like floating through the air.
It's condensation is more in that. Yeah. So, you could potentially have like air, you know, they've talked about having, you know, airships on Venus as a tourist destination.
Oh my God.
But the trick is you're way up in this thermal, you know, in this layer where it's about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, it's Earth, it's normal pressure. You just, you know, you need help to breathe. It's really the thing. You can see fine up there. You know, it's a little, I mean, it's kind of probably a big orange haze to some degree, but, but when you start, so this probe will be crashing through that very quickly. We probably won't hear anything but like just screaming wind sound, but it'll be from Venus. So, you know.
Right.
And then the camera thing is the next immediate thing, though. That's getting developed this year. So, and then meanwhile, I'm trying to put music out.
I was going to say, and you also balance your music career, right? I mean,
so you're
not doing that, right? You're still doing that. You're still in music.
No, yeah, absolutely. And that's the cool thing about the Mars sound thing actually got like a crazy amount of publicity, and that article in Wired magazine that I mentioned earlier, like people have gotten, you know, I just did a bid for the Canadian broadcasting system. Like other countries are wanting to talk about this thing. It's amazing. It's awesome. But the tie in there is the music background, right? And the sound background.
Right.
That's
exactly. It's a good story.
What they like about the story is like, you know, who's this jabroni who came along and like got this gig?
Yeah, but he's a rocker from California, like going to space. It's like a good story,
which is great. So I always try and bring back and like, by the way, new single.
I was going to say, what has it done for you? Has you seen it tick up? Have you seen more music?
A little bit, nothing crazy, but definitely like, yeah, you can see people are going over there in a way. Because prior to this, musically, yeah, it's just been small potato stuff. I mean, I did some cool shows with Al. We played, you know, some good opening acts and, you know, played with some big bands and stuff. But, you know, I was the guy in the band. It wasn't, now I'm doing an instrumental thing. It's my name, Jason Achilles. That's, you know, my musical identity. You know, it's my first and middle name. And it's all instrumental too, which is hard to get out there. It's cool, And the people that like it really like it, but you don't hear a lot of instrumentals played on the radio, for example.
Right. It's tough to cross over to that sort of thing with that. Yeah, but
yeah,
it's not.
And my style too is very old school. Like, I still record stuff on tape and all this. So
here's what I see as we close this thing down. Here's what I see. I see you have the opportunity because you have at least a foot in the space world, somewhat, right? Here's what you got to do. You got to be the guy that gets to Mars and plays guitar on Mars. So, like, you think you can make that happen, or what's going on?
That might take a while. I've got some ideas. If I'm still trying to work with JPL and with the team that is operating the other microphone, that's the French Space Agency, and there are still some ideas about how we could do some pretty cool stuff relating to audio capture from the surface, and coordinating these two microphones together, maybe to capture a stereo event or something like that.
Would you go to space? Would you go if you had the opportunity? Would you go?
Yeah, hell yeah.
You would.
As long as I can come back. Yeah, I'm not.
You're not a space station guy? No, hell no.
Well, no, I'd go for. I mean, again, as long as I can come back, But there's these people that like, I want to go to Mars and never come back. Like, Mars sucks. It's like. It's a really terrible place to live. I like,
of course, there's nothing there. How do you
breathe fresh air? I like to be able to swim. I like to be able to, see a tree. You know what I mean? Like,
see something. You want to be able to see something. What do they have?
Humans, how many millions of years did it take for us to eventually evolve onto a planet where we evolved to be, like, all right, humans and Earth are perfectly in sync with each other.
Correct.
In terms of, oops, sorry about that. I just disappeared for a second. My phone's angry at me. And Mars is horrific, and people should go there. Absolutely. I would even, I'd be down for it. I would be willing to spend 6 months in a thing there and back to walk on the surface for 3 weeks. Yes. But I'm not staying there for 2 years, and I'm not going on some one-way trip. And but yeah, man. I'll take the space carriage. Why not?
Is that what it is? 6 months? Like, what are these guys like? What's his name? Like Branson?
I know it is.
Like, what are they? Is it like when they're going to the moon or they're going to space? Like, is it how long is their journey? Like, they're these commercial journeys to space or like whatever. Is it the same time, or are they trying to make it quicker? They make it like a stealth, like what is that jet? The Concorde for spaceships to get out there quick.
There's a lot of ideas about how you could get there hopefully quicker. And a big part of that is, especially if humans have to deal with it. But right now, the constraints put it at 6 months. I think nuclear propulsion, I think is a big aspect of that. But yeah, man, did I just disappear again? Wait, what time is it, by the way?
It's 2:40. We're going to go. It's 11. It's 12:40.
Okay. No, I'm fine.
No, it's 11:40. It's 11:40. He's got to go Jason's got to go talk to kindergarten kids. So
we're fine. I just wanted to make sure because that was the teacher calling, and I was like,
they're going to be like, where is the space guy? Where is he? He's not here. He's talking to Chris about random stuff. But no, anyway.
6 months there, 6 months back to Mars. For the moon, it's more like 3 days right now, on the fastest approaches. But that's the answer to your question.
Is there a lot of leeway there? Like, if it is it got to be perfect? That trip
it's got to be pretty. Yeah, it's pretty tight. Yeah, you get an orbital mechanics sort of dictate that the Earth and Mars takes about twice as long to orbit the sun. So every 2 years you get an alignment where that provides your shortest trip. With the moon, the moon's the same distance.
Yeah,
from
the moon
is
always
so
right, exactly.
That's a little more about like where you're launching from on Earth, and
like these people people at NASA, these scientists, like, do they have like an app on their phone that like lets them know where it is in those 6 months? Like, I feel like I would be checking that thing like, oh my God, like what's going on out there? Like, what's going on?
Well, it's cool because right now, and depending on when this podcast airs, but Mars is right up in the night sky right now. At the moment, you can see it every night. So
it's crazy. I know. And it looks like a red planet.
Yeah, and it's noticeably red.
It's noticeably red.
There it is. Yeah,
it's a
red. It was cool
planet.
too. The night of the landing on February 18th. February 18th. That 18th, evening, that just randomly happened that the moon and Mars were right next to each other. And I got a great picture of it. And I was just
Dude,
like, this
that's
is
awesome, man.
And that was just, just happened to be that way that evening. But it was, you're it's cool when you like do something crazy like this. And like I can tell these kids, it's not just in your head. Go outside tonight. You can see it there. It's physical. It's there.
Right.
You're looking at it.
Right. It's right there. Yep.
Anyway.
Well, dude, I mean, for everyone out there, you guys can, if you haven't seen it already, you can Google Jason's name. You can Google like microphone on Mars, and you can read more about this stuff.
Check out the music.
Yeah, but primarily you got to check out the music. Where can they find it? Is it on like most streaming places? Like tell them your website. Like tell them where to go. Yeah,
jasonachilles.com is the website, and if you go to Spotify, I actually have 2 different accounts on Spotify. The one you want is Jason Achilles.
Jason Achilles. And he is Jason Achilles Mezilis. I am Chris Fasano, and this is the Get Overit Podcast.